the last time. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Thursday book launch. I'm Malika Albrecht, and I am the founding editor of Redheaded Stepchild. And tonight we get to celebrate Steve Cushman. I'm super excited. You won Lena Shull in 2018. So, that was a beautiful thing to see. This latest book is The Last Time, and it's out from Unicorn Press. And I have a direct link should you like to buy a copy. But also, Steve, is there a way for someone to get a signed copy? And if so, just let us know how. I'm going to do a brief bio and then I'm going to turn it over to you. Steve Cushman earned an MA from Hollins University and an MFA from UNC-Greensboro. Woo-hoo! He has published 3 novels: Portisville, which won the 2004 Novello Literary Award, Heart with Joy, and Hopscotch. Cushman's first full-length poetry collection, which won the Lena Shull Book Award in 2018, was How Birds Fly. Along with a short story collection, Fracture City, he's also published 2 poetry chapbooks, including Hospital Work and Midnight Stroll. His latest collection, the one we're celebrating tonight, is called The Last Time. Cushman lives in Greensboro and with his family. We are so excited to have you here. So welcome, Steve. And just a reminder for everybody to please mute while he's reading. Thanks, guys. Welcome, Steve.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And again, my apologies for being late and all that crazy connectivity. And I've got my fingers and toes crossed. And I don't have my quite normal setup. And so I'm holding my phone with one hand. And so hopefully that does not get too distracting or dizzying. But anyways, I'm going to start by reading a poem that's not mine. I like to always sort of feature other North Carolina poets when I can. And this is a poet named Mark Smith Soto. He has a brand new book out. He's a Greensboro poet, passed away in the fall of last year. And he has a brand new book from Unicorn Press. And so if you were to go to the link for my book, his book should be relatively close there. All right. And so, all right, so this is the title poem. This is called Daybreak. The past sweeps back at dawn, its recurrence rhythmic with the smallest losses. Oh, you know how you won't be able again be asked, taken by the hand to the little park where long-tailed kites measured heaven. The half-dream lilt of the horizon darkens, the Punta Arenas path lined by palm trees, seeding to scrubby pine, warmth yielding northward to a clump of ice. Open your eyes, see daybreak fingering the blinds, fold night away before death skirts in, scatters the tile that pales Illuma, mop to let the morning see itself. You, a boy at a wide open window, wrist to temple, feeling your hope skip under the skin. So again, Mark Smith Soto in his book Daybreak, I would certainly recommend that you pick up if you can. All right, so I'm going to read a few poems from my new collection. And I'm going to start at the front of the book and just sort of read from there a little bit. This first poem is called Quarantine Haircut. Volume good, everything good as far as... Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Quarantine haircut. I've had hundreds of haircuts over the years, but never one as intimate as the one Julie gave me yesterday, mid-quarantine, my hair standing up and out of control. And when she could take it no more, she said, "Sit down, bozo." I happily complied, always eager for her touch. She stood over me, cutting, clipping, and buzzing, and I could feel her legs on mine, her forearms brushing my ears. But it wasn't the physical touch as much as the proximity, breathing the same air like we used to do back when the sight of each other would lead to clothes flying, naked bodies moving together. But this was a haircut, scissors, a misused beard trimmer, a memory of what was once there. When she asked why I was crying, I said some hair must have irritated my eyes. And she didn't press, only wiped it away, said, "You're a fool." And she was right once again. So The next one is called The Last Exxon Oregon. I'm thinking of the time we vacationed in Oregon and I almost ran out of gas as we climbed some mountain I can't remember the name of. And Julie kept saying I should have stopped for gas at that last station. And damn, I wish I had, because we're screwed if we run out of gas here in the middle of all these Douglas firs and hemlocks and trees I can't identify. One part of me feels sick knowing we'll be stranded because our AAA membership expired. And the other part thinks, just drive, man. Just drive, and it will all work out. So I do. And every minute or so, she says, damn. And I'm grateful she doesn't call me an idiot, which I feel like, and which is mostly true anyway. Then up ahead, I see this beautiful square sign, and we pull in beside 6 lovely gas pumps. There's only one other person pumping, a guy in his mid-40s like me, and he has a Volvo full of kids and a wife, and he smiles, says that was close, and I nod. Did you lose me there a little bit?
Yep, just at the very end, Steve.
Maybe?
Yep, at the very
Oh,
end,
that was the
Steve.
best part. No, I'm just kidding.
I know, I was.
Okay. So I'll read the last couple lines.
Yeah, I was gonna
So
say that
there's
was
only one other
close.
person pumping.
Yes, that's perfect.
Yep, there's only one other person pumping, a guy in his mid-40s like me, and he has a Volvo full of kids and a wife, and he smiles, says that was close, and I nod, then walk over to the stranger and hug him at the last Exxon in Oregon, and he seems to know exactly what I need, and he hugs me back. So, all right, this next poem is a little bit different. Certainly going to be different in tone. You'll notice right away. My neighbor might try to hang himself from a garage rafter 2 months ago. Seems fine this morning, blowing leaves off his back porch. Last night, I saw him cooking burgers, a beer in one hand, spatula in the other, surveying his backyard as if amazed by its simple beauty. What makes a man want to take his life? Mental illness, chemicals, abundant sadness. Yes, and yes, and yes, and a million more yeses. When is the bottom the bottom? I don't pretend to know, and he looks fine now. But how can you forget that moment when you kick the chair away, everything tightening as your throat snaps shut? Maybe you lock the door and throw away the key. So even on those days when you reach for the door again, it will not let you in. Last night, while grilling, I watched him plant 3 pansies in a large backyard pot, orange and purple and yellow, as if he was trying to brighten the world a little. When I asked how he was doing, he said fine and taking it day by day. And he does look pretty good, maybe a little skinnier and a little shaky. But if you didn't know, you wouldn't suspect he had stood on the edge of a cliff. Someone or something beyond himself pulled him back. So, so again, obviously a very different type of poem there. One things, people always ask, certainly young poets, and I think most of the people on here, that at least the names that I saw are poets, experienced poets, is where do your ideas come from, right? And so I think for me, a lot of those ideas come from sort of a sprinkling of truth. Maybe something happened, and maybe from there you go with it. If it's an image that sticks in your mind, if it's something that you can think of often, you probably need to write it down. All right, I'm going to read a couple of poems from a couple of childhood poems, if you will. This one is called Growing Up in Florida. I never woke to the sound of my father shoveling snow to make a safe path for my sister and me to walk to school. Instead, it was hurricane cleanup. All those palm fronds, downed limbs, overturned planters, and clumps of Spanish moss, lawn chairs from God knows where floating in our pool. The night before, we'd huddled in the bathroom, windows covered with a pillow. My mother read us stories while my father grew antsy, knowing the work he'd have to do in the morning. My sister scared, then bored by the passing storm. And me, the sentimental softy, happy to be together while outside the storm raged on, leaving a mess my father would handle in the somehow still morning. I'm going to read two more childhood poems. This one's called Cast. Maybe three. It's hard to tell. Cast. So like a cast, like, you broke your arm, kind of cast. Cast. When Pete came to school with a blue cast on his forearm, I was struck with a want so deep it almost hurt. Maybe it was the way Marcia came up and rubbed it, or how Jack signed it with the black Sharpie, and the others lined up to sign it too, or the way Mrs. Ogilvy coddled him or kissed his forehead and asked what happened. I can't recall the exact story of his injury, but I remember that day at recess, climbing atop the jungle gyms and jumping with my own outstretched arms. And this next poem features a couple teenage boys not doing their best to be good. Well, I guess they're being teenage boys. This is called Laughing Lizards, again, a Florida poem. So imagine these boys are 13, 14, maybe 12. Laughing Lizards. My best friend Dennis and I spent that summer shooting lizards in his backyard. There'd be 5 or 6 on the wooden fence at all times. While you could walk up to the fence and blast them, the real challenge was to stand back 10 or 20 feet, see what kind of damage you could do. Sometimes we'd clip a tail or put holes in their sides or heads, but most often we'd only knock them off the fence into the dirt where they'd skitter away. One day, Dennis's dad came home from work early and caught us in the act, said, "What the hell you boys doing?" I'd never seen Mr. Knutson so mad. He took the BB gun from Dennis and made us stand against the fence, said to point where we wanted it. Through tears, Dennis chose his right bicep. I picked my right thigh, thinking at least the bruise would be hidden from my parents. "You ready?" he asked. And before we could answer, the pop-pop of the BB gun filled the backyard. "How do you like that, you little bastards?" he asked. We didn't like it at all. Stung like hell and left a dime-sized bruise for weeks, the pain stealing our tongue as the lizards laughed all around us. So, all right, I'm going to read a couple of, poems about my father. One of the things, my father's been gone about 30 years now, and it's a weird situation, I think, or at least for me it's weird. The longer he's gone, the more I seem I write about him. So anyways, these are a few poems about my father. And again, I apologize, it's my normal setup, so I'm shuffling a couple of things here. How many of you are boxing fans out there? So probably not too many, I would guess. But, again, for a father and son, the boxer Marvin Hagler was a big deal for us, and you'll see. This poem's called On the Death of Marvelous Marvin Hagler. All I can think of is my father and me sitting in that rented yellow house in St. Petersburg after the divorce, watching Hagler's fight with Sugar Ray and Thomas the Hitman Hearns. Being from Massachusetts like us, Marvelous Marvin was our guy, and we marveled at his speed, his sweat-slick black body, his glistening bald head. For my father and I, talk was not easy, so we cheered on Marvin, clapping together, and even once surprised ourselves by standing and hugging in celebration after he beat John the Beast Mugabe. All right, this poem is the title poem. It's called The Last Time. I found my father on the old porch swing. Let me start again, trying to balance that. The last time I found my father on the old porch swing, wearing nothing but white jockeys, drinking coffee and staring out into the yard, the back alley, the 2 tin garbage cans. We'd been up late drinking and playing pool. We even tried cards, but our hands were too shaky, our words mere shadow. It's as if we both knew this would be the last time we'd see each other, so we were trying to get it all in. That morning, I didn't go out to him. I went back to the spare room and slept another hour. When I made it back outside, he'd pulled on a pair of denim cutoffs and Leonard Skinner t-shirt he'd bought at the Zayres. Not because he liked the band, but because the shirt cost $2.99. He stood by the shed watering the purple daylilies until I said, "Hey, Dad, want some breakfast?" When I returned for the funeral 3 weeks later, the lilies were shriveled to almost nothing. I watered them, considered bringing them home, trying to resurrect them, but they weren't coming back. Another poem, another father poem, is called After the Funeral. After the funeral, Dawn let me rummage through my father's closet, and I chose the old red bowling shirt he wore every Tuesday night. On the back of the shirt, pinheads, and on the right breast pocket, Steve. Later, that night before bed, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, eyes closed, wearing his shirt. When I opened my eyes, in the first second or two, all I could see was his brown eyes staring back at me. All right, so let's see here. So one of the things, I mean, obviously I write narrative poems. I write, I come from a fiction background. And so, for me, poetry oftentimes needs story to work. And so that's what I'm interested in most often in my own writing, in my own poetry, as well as the poetry that I tend to like to read. I like a good story. And so, all right, this next poem is it's called In the Harris Teeter Produce Aisle I Watched. In the Harris Teeter Produce Aisle, I watched the shoeless blonde toddler reach for an apple while his mother studied the peaches. He took a bite of one before setting it back down. Next, he bit into a peach while she picked through the avocados, took one or two more greedy bites before they moved further along the produce aisle. A box of shredded wheat was the only thing in their cart. I studied, Mom. Cut-off jean shorts, pink flip-flops, a decades-old Meat Puppets t-shirt, a kind of shady beauty I tended to worship. I wonder if he did this on his own, or was it something she taught him? Well, I'd never know the answer to this. I sat in my car and watched them walk beyond the parking lot, past the post office and into the wine store, where I hoped there were cheese samples, maybe pretzels, even crackers would be something. All right, so I'm going to read one or two poems from my first collection. So my first collection is called How Birds Fly. And I'm going to read two poems from this one. This first poem, I worked as an x-ray tech for about 20 years, 25 years before I'm currently working in the IT department, but I worked as an x-ray tech. And one of the things that was interesting to me, at least, maybe isn't interesting to anybody else, is that in my fiction, I never really was interested in writing about hospital stuff or, things that happened at the hospital. But once I started writing poetry, for some reason, that material seemed more appropriate. Anyways, so this is a poem that I wrote, and it was one of the first poems that I wrote that made me think that I could do something with my hospital experience. And it's called On the Third Floor at Moses Cone Memorial Hospital. Pushing the portable x-ray machine on my way to do a stat chest on a Mr. Wilson in 3002, I spotted two older ladies standing in the hall, leaning against their IV poles. They both had to be in their late 70s, decked out in loose hospital gowns, red skid-proof socks stuffed into white slippers from home. They were laughing as if this was where they wanted to spend a Tuesday afternoon. One of the ladies had white hair and the other red.
I think we lost you, Steve. We'll give him a minute, guys.
Is that okay?
I hear you again, but we lost you pretty early on.
Okay, I'll read it again. No problem. I mean, I like the poem, so
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was
I'm
really
just kidding.
invested in these two ladies, so.
All right, so we'll do it again. So on the third floor at Moses Cone Memorial Hospital, pushing the portable x-ray machine on my way to do a stat chest on a Mr. Wilson in 3002, I spotted two older ladies standing in the hall, leaning against their IV poles. They both had to be in their late 70s, decked out in loose hospital gowns, red skid-proof socks stuffed into white slippers from home. They were laughing as if this was where they wanted to spend a Tuesday afternoon. One of the ladies had white hair and the other red. I didn't realize the red hair was a wig until the white-haired lady reached up to straighten it, as if to say, "Come on, let's get ourselves together here." And the lady with the wig blushed, as if to say, "Aren't we beyond all that now?" And the other lady shook her head, as if to say, "No, we never really are." Two more poems. I'm going to read two more poems. I'm going to read the title poem from How Birds Fly and one more poem from the new book. Sorry, you still see me there. All right, so how do birds fly? My son asked tonight before bed. He's 5, and I'm trying to read the Magic School Bus to him, but he's having none of this story because earlier at the park he came to me, pulled me by the hand, and showed me a dead sparrow beneath the slide. When I said we should leave it alone, he said no, we had to do something. And of course, he was right. So we did what I didn't want to do, brought the bird home, buried it in the backyard. We tied together 2 popsicle sticks to make a cross for the gravesite. I said a prayer, "Lord, please watch over this small bird and may its soul rest in peace." When I looked over, my son was crying. I hugged him, said these things happen. And he said he knew, then ran inside to play video games for an hour while I made dinner. And now it's late, and I've had 2 glasses of wine, and he's asking how birds fly. So I say they have wings, muscles, like we have legs and muscles that allow us to walk. And he looks at me and says, "If we're like birds, are you going to die?" And I say, "Someday, but not today or anytime soon." And he says, "It's like magic, isn't it?" "What's that, Trevor?" "How birds can fly," he says. And I think muscle and bone and nerve synapse. I think 5 years old. And I say, yes, it is like magic, all of it, as I stand to turn out the lights. So we'll go from that to a poem that's not at all like that, but what the heck. So this poem is called, it's the last poem in the book. It's called "The Candera Fish is So Small It Could Swim Up Your Urethra." Okay. The Candera fish is so small it could swim up your urethra is what Mrs. Hart, my 9th grade biology teacher, said 30 some years ago. So when Julie says, "Let's go skinny dipping," instead of being excited, I'm transported back to Mrs. Hart's class in St. Petersburg, where all we had to cool us off on those Florida afternoons was one lone window unit. So we threaded through her lectures until the day we sat up straight and listened as she discussed urethras and penises and the dangers lurking beneath the surface. "Come on," Julie is saying, naked now, her clothes in a stack at the shore. her pale shoulders bouncing up and down at the water's surface. I strip bare, tell myself we're nowhere near the Amazon River. Run with everything I have into the water, into Julie's arms. And again, she's rescuing me from myself, from my silly fears, and all those murky, dangerous things, seen and unseen. Thank you.
Ah, that was awesome, Steve. I'm still upset about
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Hart
Thank you
saying
so
that.
much.
If people want to unmute, y'all can please do so. Yes, all those murky, dangerous things seen and unseen.
Oh
There's
my
some great
goodness.
comments,
That
Steve. You're
was
gonna have a
lovely.
blast.
Wow. Well, great. I look forward to seeing them. I can't quite see them on the phone, just with the phone, but
Yep, I will
I will
send you the
definitely
whole
take a look at
thing.
them.
Yeah, when I send it to you, I think you're gonna be very happy.
All right.
Yeah, a lot of people are putting the same thing. Wonderful reading is showing up multiple times. So let's kind of talk, because I saw a
Great.
common theme where people were saying, Steve, just, the details and how you just really bring something to life. And of course, I liked when you started talking about narrative poems being something that, you enjoy writing, you enjoy reading, and that's your background as a prose writer. And then you said that you found that poetry was a better vehicle, or you were starting to write about working in the hospital as an X-ray tech. And I kind of wondered,
Mhm.
how do you decide when you're working on a piece that this feels more like something I want to express in poetry, or this feels like a short story or prose? Does it just kind of find its way that way, or what are your thoughts
Yeah,
behind your process
think-
there?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that some, I'm sure a handful of those poems probably started as a flash piece or part of a story. Laughing Lizards actually I know was a flash piece. And I think just sometimes it's really
Oh, we
Uh-oh.
lost you. We lost that little bit. You said it's really, and then that's the last we heard.
No, it's really, I don't really know. I think I just sort of work on them, and sometimes they feel like poems and sometimes they feel more prosy. I think, as I'm working on it, I know if I'm going to get a lot more into movement of characters and things like that, I know it's probably going to have to be a story, in some light, right? But many of my pieces start as one thing, poetry turn into a flash fiction piece or vice versa. I think, and you'd asked earlier, and I'm not sure how much I got to answer before, if it sort of fell or we dropped, but about the X-ray stuff and the details. And I think one of the reasons for me, it was easier to see a lot of the X-ray images and the things I had experienced in images. And sort of I wrote about things that I had seen, and it just felt more natural in poetry as opposed to maybe a whole narrative. And so, yes, hopefully that answers some of that question.
No, I'm fascinated by that answer. Thank you. And I think there's something about X-ray tech and in that experience that is very imagistic. So it's not a surprise that perhaps it wants to be expressed more in a poem, or poetry lends itself more easily. So, to looking at that. That's awesome. I looked through and didn't see any questions in the chat section. So feel free to unmute and just ask Steve any questions that occurred, or lines that stuck with you, or poems in particular. I did see a couple people putting down, which poems were their favorite. And that was interesting to see. I think you'll have fun with that, Steve.
Yeah, I'm
If
definitely
there's
curious.
yeah, it's fun. It's fun to look back and see what resonated, and the lines that many of us put down at the same time. Again, come on, let's get ourselves together here. Several of us put that one down. Laura, I saw you like that as well. Did I miss anybody with a question? Just unmute and feel free to ask.
Yeah, I
I've
have
got
a question.
Okay, Sparrow.
Professor, I was just wondering if these poems were all written from your personal experience, because that's kind of what it seemed like. Like they seemed like you were the narrator, and so I was just wondering if they were like things you've actually experienced.
Hi, Sparrow. So yes, Sparrow is one of my students in a class I'm teaching at UNCG this semester. So I would say that most of them are, but I would also say that I am perfectly fine to take a real event or real situation and twist it a little bit to give it a little more conflict or sort of pop. So I think that's so I think most of them came from yeah most of them came from some real experience, just taken a little bit further.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
It's a great question. And one that I think a lot of us, wonder about. Ron, you had another one?
Yeah, I mean, it's very similar to Sparrow's. I really connect with your poetry quite a bit, Steve. I love the feeling of a lived life in everything you read, and the connection with the world right immediately around you, and with you the times in your life. We get a sense of time and place both. And I'm wondering, like, that's the kind of stuff I try to do in my own writing and in my stories. And I've gotten kind of cynical about writing that kind of springs out of just ideas. I was wondering if you have ever done that, or whether it's just totally anathema to you to do something like that. Just
When
having in the idea world, not the physical world.
It's not where I go normally. I mean, I sort of wake up every day and I think to myself, I just sort of see what comes. And I don't sit down and say, oh, I'm going to write another, father and son poem or something. But those are, I think, the things that are on your mind, and I think this, Ron, certainly, that the things that are sort of there. Those are the things we go back to, and I read from different sections of the book, and sort of my subjects are family, working in hospitals. Those are the things that I'm most interested in, and so therefore those are the things that I write again and again, and I go back to them. And again, as you know, Ron, when you're putting a manuscript together, you have all this stuff, and we shape it into something specific, right? So yeah. So basically, I think the short answer is yes. I mean, I think for me, I'm much more of a physical space, a sort of real world person, as opposed to living in just ideas or themes or that kind of thing. It's a good question, though.
Again, these are questions that we could have long discussions on.
Mm-hmm.
There was a question that Melinda had, which will be an easy one, yes or no. Were there two poems you read tonight in the Tar River review? The Tar River poetry is what Melinda was asking, Steve.
So the Candera, the last one, was in Tar River, but I think that was the only one. I think I've only been in there with the one poem. And I think that Melinda, so that particular issue, Melinda, I believe, reviews, I can't remember the exact title, but that may be why she saw it. But yeah, so just that one poem.
I thought you did. I thought there was a Harris Teeter poem and a Tar River poetry too, but maybe you have another Harris Teeter, like Meeting My Father at Harris Teeter. Was that it?
In Cackalack. In Cackalack, I have a couple of them in Cackalack. And I will say this, I'll put a little bit of just so everybody, I'm sure most everybody on the call knows about Cackalack, right? And the deadline is May 31st. It's an anthology for North and South Carolina poets. Mike Gaspenny, my great buddy Mike, gave me good advice. I had whined one or two times about not being in Cackalack. And he said, man, you got to put something with North Carolina in it. So once I started putting Harris Teeter and Kitty Hawk and other such things, so that's my advice. Get some, I know they say the spirit of North Carolina, but have some North Carolina geography in there. And I think it's got to help, bump you up a little bit in the slush pile. But no, I think that poem was in Catholic.
That's awesome. I think we should make a private list of Carolina things that might get us in Cackalack. Just put it in the chat section. I'll send it to everybody.
That's a great idea. I mean,
I think we could definitely come up with a good list. Claudine was asking if anybody's going to the Cackalack reading on Sunday. So I did want to put that out there. And if you wanted details, I bet you Claudine could give it to us. And Melinda says tractors win prizes. Okay, I do have tractor envy of some of my neighbors. I have my own tractor, but still have tractor envy.
Horses, cows, anything like
Yeah,
that, I
why
think
not
is
more?
yeah.
And
And I think,
grandmothers.
we say that jokingly, but I mean, every year that I read the anthology, I'm really impressed with, poem after poem in there. So they do a wonderful job, but yeah. As for Claudine's thing, so actually, thanks for bringing that up, Claudine. So actually, I'm coordinating that event. So it's Saturday from 2 to 3:30. I'm sorry, it's Sunday, 2 to
Okay.
3:30 at Scupper and Ogg's Book. If you are interested in reading there, you can email me. The people that I invited were the people that were given to me by by Anne from Cackalack. But if you live in the area within an hour or so and you want to read, and you're in the new issue of Cackalack, you can reach out to me and we can see what we can do to get you on the list. There's gonna be a lot of people, a lot of good poems, and a lot of fun. So I would imagine I can think of at least, again, I couldn't, being on the phone, I couldn't see all the names, but I saw 3 or 4 people, maybe 5 that I knew were going to, I know we're going to be there on Sunday already. So
Awesome. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. And I'm putting, again, the connection to Unicorn Press to get The Last Time, which was a
yeah.
lovely, the title poem is just amazing. Any
And you
more
had
questions
mentioned,
or thoughts? Oh, sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. You're good. You're fine. I was going to say, you
Hey,
mentioned as
Steve.
far as, yeah.
Hey, it's Dana. Listen,
Hey,
I
Dana.
love your poetry about your father and then how you described him in one of your books. I mean, it's so endearing and so touching. I really enjoy reading about that. So I just want to say great job.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Ron, you had a question? Jump in.
No, just a stupid comment. I think my next poem is going to be called Several Things About North Carolina That Might Get Me in Cackalack.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's got potential. I would try it. I would
I'm
read
holding you to it, Ron.
Yeah, I
I'm
know. How
holding you
could they
to it.
refuse, right?
it. I mean, I think it's worth a try. That's what I think.
You could do a simple list poem and just see,
Yeah.
what you
Yeah.
could do with that. Here are the
That would be fun.
things. Oh, that's so good.
About getting into Cackalack.
I
But
am
I would
all
also
in.
say, like I mentioned, if you're not familiar with Mark Smith Soto's writing, again, he's a Greensboro poet. He passed away in the fall, and he really is a wonderful poet. And the new book is also by Unicorn Press, and so I would highly recommend it, as well as a number of his previous books. But
Mhm.
but if you're not familiar with Mark's work, I would suggest searching for it.
Yeah, I like that you do that, Steve, because some people may not have heard of Mark Smith Soto, and it's nice to connect other poets to each other. I think that's
Mhm.
one of the benefits of having this community and meeting weekly. And I'm going to go ahead and brag that we have the best open mic. We do. And we're heading towards it. Yeah. And so be prepared. Any more
All right.
questions for Steve or thoughts? We'll just take a moment to say thank you so much, Steve, for letting us celebrate with you. I was a fabulous reading.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. I really
Thank you. I have Ron, you're the first person I have up for open mic.
Oh my God. Okay. All right. So this is a little I call it a tone poem. It's a 1-page prosy thing, but it's in Philly. Growing up, we had these mostly the Catholic schools, but other places had weekly dances during the terms, and you danced with somebody that you really were just dreaming about at night every night, and especially the slow dances. So, I was wondering if they have that in North Carolina also, were there kind of weekly or regular dances going on? Does anybody know? In the 60s, mainly 70s? No? Okay. So this will give you a sense of what it was like. And the song that's in it is called I Love How You Love Me, and it's by the Paris Sisters. It's an old, even pre kind of 60s song, like right on the cusp of the 60s. So here's the story's called Slow Dancing. Her scent was a bridge inviting me to move over the water, and I crossed, pressed into the folds of her baby blue blouse, felt the dunes and gorges of her thighs against me, and her feather nest hair on my cheek. I floated off the dance floor, rose and circled, a night moth, swirling round a candle, the slow, slow music whispering, I love how your heart beats whenever I hold you. And ours were beating hard. And the dance chaperone, Robespierre, came over and severed us with a hand chop. Valerie Rowan. Since freshman year, I'd spied on her from across the floor almost every week on Friday nights at St. Joe's Hall. The last dance before school let out for the summer, I got my nerve up. We danced apart to some fast songs, which I was not dazzling at. Being in front of her without touching was good enough. I touched with my eyes. And after that, she did not return to her bevy of swans against the far wall, but looked up at me from under her eyelashes. A smile shivered on her lips as the song started. The Paris Sisters, I love how you love me. If you've never slow danced with your dream lover to that, you haven't breathed. She smelled like a secret, a whiff of powder, the woman's scent of her skin, and a hint of musk. As Robespierre slid away, the Paris Sisters purred, when I'm away from you, I love how you miss me. We refolded. A second wave of fragrance washed ashore, and we picked up our rubbing together. Valerie whimpered little mms from some deeper place, and I lifted my head enough to see her eyes shut tight, moving inward away from me towards some new place under her own sun. As Robespierre launched a second assault, and I released my hand from the crest of her soft pillows, Valerie's ivory cheeks burned a deep pink that made her prettier than ever, and the sisters sighed, I love the way your touch is always heavenly. And when the song ended, I said, thank you, with a formality that surprised me. And she said, you're welcome, breathlessly. Thank you.
Oh, Ron, that is fabulous. Please look at the comments in the chat section. She smelled like a secret, but that one, I think, got 3 of us at the same time. I have Catherine written down next. Make sure you unmute. Yep, unmute, Catherine.
Okay, yep. It's just a short one. I'm in the cave trusting a butterfly in its chrysalis, transforming transforming emotional pain beneath the strain of not knowing. That's it.
Oh, that's lovely, Catherine.
Thank you.
I like the mystery in there too.
Yeah.
Christy, you are up next.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes,
Mhm.
ma'am.
This is one that has been written for a while, but I just edited it and I feel better about this version. And so this will be in the next collection that I'm trying to get back to. There was a time when coffee tasted better than it should. Before your voice stilled itself inside the hush of a ventilator. Before I knew 20 ounces of bottled water choked your half-beaten heart. Before I looked for wet clouds in your eyes. Before you were never going to be the same. We sprawled across wrought iron chairs, laughter spilled over the circumference of us. You caught my tipped mug under the green mermaid dotted umbrella, facing an oncoming pedestrian, her feet trying to beat her arms in a race towards the idling sonata. Your pink fingertips dance the tabletop, regaling heart-lived tales. Your pulse oximeter yet to enter our scene. Thank you.
Oh, Christy, that is powerful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I love the wet clouds. Karen, I've got you up. Don't forget to unmute.
I am unmuted.
Yay.
I know Regina has heard a version of this. This came out of a prompt writing Zoom, and the prompt was a poem called The Gift. And I drew a complete blank on that. So instead of writing to the poem, I Googled, and it was a poem that was in Poetry Magazine. So instead of writing to the poem, I Googled The Gift just to see how many poems poetry had published with that title. And it was a lot. So I just stole the first line of each of the first 7 poems that popped up. So to give credit to those, I think I'm just going to raise my hand when I'm reading a line that I stole. But it's the first line of each of my weird little stanzas. So this is, of the first 7 lines of the first 7 poems poetry gave me when I searched for the gift. When I got the box home from the gun shop, stop, I am cocked, locked, and loaded with lies. Neither I nor any of my people, paternal, maternal, have ever had actual guns, only metaphorical weapons and ammo, both sides. To pull the metal splinter from my palm, my father would have cried secret tears before starting. You can tell whether a bird has a mate. My father was a wounded bird. His mate could not be as gentle as he. She was too wounded to discern gentle from not. Dear, now you have unfolded that familiar pain of family, of the frail promises lovers live on. Here is the heart at last. While I have tried to hold its shards, I have held its beatings. I have held its muffled arrhythmias. This I have done, wild heart. This I have known.
Aaron, holy smoke.
Wow.
Damn.
Feeling some
Yeah.
lines.
Dang.
I love when you bring us one of your prompt poems because you always blow me away, but please check the chat section because some of us were going on fire here with so many of the lines. Thank you. Cal, I have you written down. Make sure you unmute. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. I used to work at a store in downtown Raleigh that was a hangout, and I worked the night shift, and I noticed that people did get kind of crazy when there was a full moon, and so it turns out I searched for that, and it turns out that's true. It's not just a saying. And this poem is called Lunacy. Inspired by the opening scenes of Un Chien Andalo Part 1 by Louis Buñuel and Salvador Dali, and the moon, there is wind in the trees, and a very full moon in the east, mottled with seas. A pine tree bends over to the west, and a thin cloud cuts across her face, but she does not bleed. It's just an illusion, of course. No ancient mother looks down on us with a cloudy gray eye, impervious to a dark streak of water vapor that just dispersed in the high wind, which has now brought rain. Still, one thing is sure. When the sky clears later and the streets are lit up by her big round face, a lot of people down here are going to go crazy. Thank you.
Thanks, Cal, which has now brought rain. Check the chat section. I have Regina next. Regina.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Okay. Malika and Catherine, I apologize because you have heard this. I did make corrections based on, we're in a little group. Based on suggestion, I kind of reworked it. So here we go. This poem is actually, I wouldn't say it was a response poem, but it did come from a lesson that Jericho Brown offered the world during this month, this National Poetry Month. And he has used as a impetus for the lessons, so the poetry of Reginald Shepherd. He is actually curating a book entitled, or he has curated a book entitled The Selected Shepherd, which I will most certainly be getting because it's enthralled. It comes from, I have an epigraph that actually comes from a poem by Reginald Shepherd, No White Dove. And it is simply, my mother always falling. My mother was a tree, was a river. My mother stood tall. My mother ran down secrets. My mother dredged up truths. My mother walked towards danger, slept with it, pulled out a knife, dared it to kill her. My mother was steadfast, moved quickly in resolve, moved silently to ensure. My mother was a reaper, scythe slicing what dared remove her, us. My mother was beauty, wore wispy red curls and dawn dresses that hugged her petite brown frame. My mother was assassinated many times, and many times she rose again. My mother was full of the trembling fullness that her face never revealed. My mother was brimming with a heat that you might never have known before you felt the burn. My mom. My mother, sometimes falling like a tree. My mother never let it, us, fall. My mother, always rising righteous. My mother lifting praise hands. My mother loving, living, dying. My mother laughing like she be knowing heaven is really real. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, yes. It's gorgeous. I'm glad I got to
It is
hear it.
gorgeous.
And also yeah, it's gorgeous. I have Laura next.
Unmute.
Awesome. Thanks.
Okay. This poem was inspired by a performance piece that was broadcast by the Museum of Modern Art the other night. Karen can attest that it was pretty out there. And it was called Signal Near and Far Telepathy. And it was a performance piece by David DeGregorio and Joan Jonas. Here, hold my bear. Sound moves through space, call and response, drum punctuated. Hear the signal and understand. Do you receive me? Do you receive? We are all Schrodinger's cat, trapped in a box, neither dead nor alive. We can hear the gulls crying, but they are out of sight and their voices fade into distance until all that's left is wind. Do you receive me? Do you receive? Thank you.
Oh, wow.
Very weird.
That's fabulous. Thank you, Laura. Yep. We can hear the gulls crying, but they're out of sight. That was fabulous. Yeah, y'all doing it again. Allie, I have you next.
Awesome. So this poem, Steve was mentioning earlier about what inspires you as a poet, and one of the things that inspires me is reading nonfiction books and then seeing where the connective tissue and association kind of lies. So that's what this poem is drawn from. Salty like the sea. It's not exactly true that you must baby a cast iron skillet, but it never hurts to treat a thing as worthy of salt. So I sprinkle it on and scour away the grease. Once I interviewed a chef who told me You have to taste everything as you go. I think she was talking about cooking, but cooking can be a metaphor for anything. I use the same kosher salt for bread, for soup, for caramels, for popcorn. The grains whisper into the pot to season the pasta. Salty like the sea, but I've never calculated that point with my tongue. We have always been looking for salt, following buffaloes, dredging the seas, crunching rocks between our teeth. Preservation is what it means to be essential. In the US Civil War, the Union targeted salt production, the same kind of salt that was used for ballast to account for the weight of enslaved people. Salt is a heavy, heavy thing. Tears are regularly swallowed into oceans.
Oh, Allie, that is amazing. Yep, always been looking for salt. Thank you so much. It's also nice to hear where people get inspiration from or what is the flashpoint of the poem. Shamala, I'm coming to you. I'm so glad to see you.
It's really good to be here. This is a magical community, Malika, and I'm very grateful for you for creating it and for everyone here. This is, it's an ekphrastic, but it's using an ekphrastic to talk about lived experience, I suppose, based on the Winged Victory in the Louvre, where it's, up at the top of this flight of stairs, this huge statue standing there. It's called Crushing Victory. Headless and armless she stands, poor girl, named Victory, and yet what does she have? With stone feet unable to move, stuck on a pedestal to inspire, and yet, without arms even of stone, what agency? She can do nothing, not even listen, because look, no head either, no eyes to see, no ears to listen, no features to capture our attention, so that we say, ah, thus and so she is. This is what she feels. This is what she dreams. This is what she hopes. This is what she needs. But she has nothing, only absence. What is trapped within that barely draped torso that can never be expressed? Where does she hope to fly with those spread wings? Was she a caryatid, arms and head crushed, perhaps, by weighty architecture of state? Perhaps a place of assembly for free men who came and went, untroubled and uninterested in the voices, never mind the agency of women or enslaved people. And so she lost her face, her arms, her everything but frozen shell, set not only on pedestal, but at the head of a grand vertiginous staircase, as if goddess. But goddess not allowed to be woman, human, warm, to move in the world of men and life. Goddess not allowed to fall, though fall is beneath her every second of every day. Goddess instead compelled to inspire, to feed others while starving, herself erased, forgotten, mythologized. And so her sisters, to this day, even those with arms, faces, and no wings, seen and yet unseen.
Wow. Thank you. On fire tonight. And of course, you know to go look at the chat section because there's a lot of comments there, Shamala, that really resonated. And our last reader for Open Mic, I'm really excited about. Claudine, you have a new book coming out. Can you give us the details when it's coming out and where we can get it?
Yes, I'm actually going to pick up my copies of the book, which is called Demise of Pangea, on Sunday at the Kakalak reading at Scuppernong. So I'm picking up my copies. So that means anybody who orders something from it's from Main Street Rag. I'm sorry. Yeah, Main Street Rag is putting it out. It's available on their website. And my name is Claudine Moreau. And it's my first full-length book of poems. So I'm so excited. I can't believe it. I have a reading with Pat Bizzaro on Tuesday at Elon. I'm a professor at Elon University. And then Pat and I are going to go to Waterbean in Huntersville. I think it's Huntersville on Wednesday of next week, and we're going to read together there. And what's really wonderful is that Pat was my first poetry professor, Pat Bizzaro. And yeah, he's very special. And the weird thing about, so the poem I'm going to read is that there is sort of a congruence of things happening. So I'm working on a new collection, which is 90s nostalgia. And, but through the lens of celestial phenomenon in the 90s. I'm a physics and astronomy professor, so I teach a lot about physics and astronomy, and celestial events are important to me. So it's weird because like I was just recently contacted by the person who introduced me to Pat Bizzaro that made my writing take the next step, you know, kind of level, like where I started taking it seriously. And I wrote a poem, and the poem I'm going to read is actually sort of inspired by that person. The good, the bad, the everything, everything. But so I am just so excited. Like I'm finally, like I took a 10-year lull of writing, you know, and I'm finally getting my book out, and it feels great. And I'm texting myself ideas of like what I'm writing next. So this is a new poem. This is not in my new book, but this is something I'm thinking about for my next collection. So here we go. It's called The Road. Oh, and by the way, do you all know what Hale-Bopp was? The comet in the late 90s? Okay, all right, because it's in this poem. Again, the celestial event. All right, the road through Richmond was paved with diamonds. At first, loving him made life feel supple and warm. Imagine your hand stroking a tortoiseshell cat who's just moved onto your lap from a rectangle of afternoon sun on carpet, whose attention and purr is all for you and only you. It was drinking champagne from the bottle, walking riverside paths on humid southern nights, our pockets stuffed with On the Road and Howl, to be read under dim street lights. It was endless rehearsals of Eric Bogosian monologues and letting Julie Cruz float us into the night and trip hop coo us into Xanax dreams. But then New Order and the Pontiac Sunbird 6-disc changer bred the seeds. Confusion, the view, his fist-cracked windshield studded the northbound road to Richmond with diamonds. The love-making turned. I saw Hale-Bopp in our window burn in the sun, crumble, its streaming veil bursting light as the nucleus of rock and ice released everything that it had. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudine. Oh, that's awesome and gorgeous. And again, look at the comments that were coming up. I love the images that come into collision in that poem. And I did want to say, I hope you'll come celebrate with us one Thursday. We would love to celebrate your first full length, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm giving you a minute to look into the chat section, Claudine, so you don't miss it. I want to thank Steve again for letting us celebrate the last time with him, and everybody for being here, creating community, and to everybody who read for Open Mic, thank y'all again. And Shamala, so good to see you. And everybody, be well. I will see y'all next Thursday.
Thank you, Malika.
All right, thanks so much.